Welcome to the Natural Wisdom Podcast. I'm Christine Backus, your host, and today, January 6th, Monday, January 6th, I am really excited to have Emily Trinkaus of the Embodied Aquarian joining me today for one of our regular Cosmic Wisdom Chats. Hey, Emily.
Hi, Christine. Very excited to be here and talk about the epic astrology of 2025.
It's going to be an epic chat about a lot of epic stuff. So in order to kind of get settled for this, we're going to do just a quick, short meditation just to kind of get grounded for all of us, and especially those of us that are going to be try to be intelligent today. So wherever you are, if you're somewhere you can't close your eyes, then please don't. Like if you're driving or something, but wherever else you are, if you can either take your gaze down or close your eyes and just bring your attention into your physical experience. That is one of my themes for this year is embodiment, embodiment, embodiment. And so one of my favorite practices is just to feel, sense, use your five senses right now for a few moments to just really tune in to your felt physical experience. Super helpful to feel feet on the ground or seat against the chair and feel that physical contact with the earth, even if it's mediated through objects and buildings. Just really get that sense of being held by the earth, maybe even be a little grateful for that hug of gravity right now. Perhaps notice your clothes against your skin or the air against your skin. Might notice the sounds around you. Maybe there's a scent or a smell in the air. If your eyes are closed, maybe you see the play of light behind your eyelids. See if you can just, for a moment, tune into all five senses. And just notice your actual felt experience right now. Even though we're all connected through computers and airwaves and electronics, we're also connected actually through the earth at the same time. And then for a couple of breaths, just notice your physical experience of breathing. Notice that you don't have to do it. It does its own thing. It's another way to sort of tune in to the connection with life and everything around you, is that bringing in the breath and then exhaling out through that cosmic ebb and flow that we experience all the time. And then as you're ready, you can come back to our shared space. Whether you're here live or listening by recording, you're still part of this energetic connection that we're forming. And thank you. And thank you all. Thank you for being here live, those of you that have joined us. And thank you for listening, those of you that are listening later or watching. In case you don't know, if you're listening to this somewhere else, you can watch the video on my Substack. And I'll put a link in the show notes just in case. And that's also where you would sign up for my newsletter as well as Emily's work. And yeah, and we'll talk more about some of our offerings coming up. Okay, so we are going to try to give you like a glimpse into this year 2025, and we're going to look back a little bit to 2024 in order to do that. Because I think what you're going to find is that most astrologers right now are just goggle-eyed as they look at the astrology of 2025. And I've been comparing it to the astrology of 2020, although it's a very, very, very different kind of energy. Whereas 2020 was a contraction and dismantling in 2025, we start to get a taste of the new, and everything begins to shift and goes forwards and backwards. So, Emily, we talked about starting with maybe the current energy, which we're still in, like of Mars and Pluto, but I'm going to let you, what would you like to dive into first?
Well, I guess just to say that, and by the way, thank you for that meditation. That felt really good. Um, just to say that, we can have this idea like it's a new year, and even though I'm sure everyone listening is aware, okay, it's just a calendar year and not necessarily, aligned with new energies. But this year especially, the new year starts with Mars retrograde, and Mars is the planet of action and direction and even goals and desires. So this is not a new year where on January 1st we're super clear about our sense of direction and I want this and we have to get up and go to pursue all of that. No, this is a more sluggish start to the new year. And the way I see it, it doesn't really get going until May. So early May is when we come out of Mars, the full influence of Mars retrograde. And just today, here we are on January 6th, just today, Mars shifted from Leo back into Cancer. And Mars is going to be in Cancer until April 17th. And Mars does not love to be in Cancer. Now we can talk about it. There's a lot of productive inner work that is being called for while Mars is in Cancer. But this is not, again, this isn't a big, get up and go and push your agenda forward. This is more about revisiting the past, doing deep inner work, resolving family issues, doing a lot of emotional work and resolution and healing. So yeah, that's kind of the energy as we start. And we just had the second exact opposition between Mars and Pluto on January 3rd. I feel like we never really got out of the first one, which was November 3rd. Mars and Pluto have been opposite each other for the past couple of months, and there are points when it's more intense, as we had on January 3rd and November 3rd. There's still very much an opposition, and the first full moon of the year coming up in about a week, the full moon in Cancer, Mars and Pluto are going to be right there on the sun and moon. So we're very much in that energy as well. And this is really calling us to go really deep within ourselves, to get to the core of our desires and needs and what really motivates us, and do some realigning of our personal or ego's desires with our soul's desires. And this is a setup that can be very easy to get super triggered by other people. And we just want to keep coming back to ourselves, because whatever is getting triggered, as I keep saying, probably has nothing to do with the present. It's all about the past. It's all old, and especially old family stuff, childhood stuff, Mars and Cancer, that is resurfacing because we're ready to heal it.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed. In fact, I did one of my rare little Facebook live posts the other day, because what I noticed with both of these Mars-Pluto oppositions, on which I think, as you say, has been sort of present for a while and will be for a while, is that there's this like intense buildup of energy that has nowhere to go. And one of my thoughts about that is that I've noticed a lot of anger, and we noticed literal explosions last week, right? So I think one of to your point, is this is a great time with Mars retrograde to be kind of sorting through what's important to you, right? That's kind of the purpose of it. It's interesting that we have this Mars retrograde period at the beginning of the year, and it feels like it's preparing the way for some of the other things coming up, like Jupiter moving into Cancer this year. And that whole, what do you want to put your energy towards?
Well,
And that's kind of to me, that's one of the main opportunities with this beginning of the year.
yeah, and to contextualize the Mars retrograde within what we're coming into, and this is something I talked about in my Mars retrograde class, that as all of these slow moving planets move into masculine signs, and we're going to talk about that, and especially Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries, ruled by Mars, I just find it a really poetic setup that Mars is retrograde as we approach all of that, because this is our chance to get right with our own masculine energy. Because all of the slow moving planets moving into masculine signs, and masculine meaning in this context more extroverted, more external, more happening, more action oriented. So if we're going to be more action oriented and things moving more quickly, and we're being called to step out more with our courage, with our confidence, Aries, well, we need to know what's worth putting our energy into. As you said, what is really important? What is our priority? And also, this is like, okay, what's the inner work I need to do to prepare to be more out there and more assertive and more, yeah, in that masculine energy.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting the other, when you think about like again, kind of how these cycles are working and what's setting up for what's next. The other thing is we're coming off a year and a half with the lunar nodes in Aries and Libra, ruled by Mars, ruled by Venus. And it's kind of, the theme that I've been sort of pushing on for this last year and a half is what do you want? Because so much of our culture tells us, A, desire is bad, what you want is bad, don't be yourself, don't come to yourself. And there's, I think that's part of what this is about too, is coming down to what's your real desire. I could see,
Right. And just along with that, culture tells us what to want.
yes,
We're very conditioned to go in certain directions. And I think, yeah, with the North Node now finishing up in Aries and a series of eclipses in Aries, coming back to the sovereign self and independent mind and independent thinking. And okay, society told me I should want this, and my family expected this and told me I should want that. What and the discernment is what really brings me alive, because I think even more than desire, I think the essence of that Aries archetype has to do with our core vitality. Where's the fire? And I think this is where the real crisis is in the culture. This is the opposite of that is depression. And as we know, we have an epidemic of depression. That's not sadness, that's a lack of life force. I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I have nothing to get out of bed for. Right? Where's the fire? Where's the motivation? I think this ties in with our sense of purpose as well, thinking about the sun's exaltation in Aries, right? And the sun having to do with how are we shining our light in the world? What is my creative purpose?
right. Yep, I totally agree. And a lot of it, I think one of the major themes of this whole period is coming back to what's really me, right? What's really me, what's really mine, whether you think of it as desire or my passions, and what's my unique, I call it my unique frequency, my unique energetic frequency. And that theme of authenticity to me is also, for one thing, I think that's partly where we've been with where we are and where we're going with the Pluto into Aquarius transition is the real need to come back to the center in order to kind of navigate the outside world, the social world, especially because Pluto, I mean, that's part of Pluto's gift is bringing you back to your own power, but only if you're paying attention.
We're definitely coming back to Pluto and Aquarius, but I also, on the Aries front, I want to mention Chiron in Aries, and that we had that very profound solar eclipse at 19 degrees of Aries, precisely conjunct Chiron on April 8th last year. And Chiron is now back at 19 degrees for a couple of months because Chiron just started moving forward again as it's hanging out there. The sun is going to come into a square with Chiron. The next full moon is square Chiron. So this Chiron in Aries, which has been, Chiron's been in Aries since 2018, and this has been about the healing of identity, the healing around who am I? And I think this is a lot about personal power and recognizing the power of the individual, which I think is another thing that we've been conditioned out of. In other words, we're conditioned to think that little me is little me, and this tiny separate self in a vast unknowable multiverse, and I have no power, and nothing could be further from the truth. And Chiron, not only about healing the wounded self, the sense of identity, but also Chiron is a renegade. Chiron is a maverick, as they say. Chiron is the weirdo. And so this is about owning our quote weirdness, and I say weirdness in the best possible way, owning what we might think is wrong with us as part of our gift, or what we're here. Yeah. So being our full selves with our apparent woundedness and all, and coming out of the victim, because that's a big shadow or distortion of Aries is the powerlessness, and it all comes down to who am I? How do I understand what this self is? What it means to be an individual self.
And owning your right to exist. That to me, that's been the Chiron Aries thing. That there's and I know we've talked about it, that really fundamental right to be you and to be here. And really feeling that and owning it, because a lot of people don't.
And I think this does tie right back into Pluto in Aquarius. Aquarius and Aries are naturally sextile in harmony with each other. And this is about, Aries, if I own my right to exist and own who I am and can conceive of myself in the biggest expression of self possible, a very expansive way, then I engage with the collective Aquarius from that place of personal empowerment. And it's not like I'm better than everyone else, or look at me, I'm so me, but more like, we each have a particular role to play in the collective. And this is about each of us owning that 100% unique role and then engaging with humanity and giving our gifts, engaging with community, society groups from that place. And Aquarius is about being the weirdo and being willing to not be liked by everyone, being willing to be different. There's a lot of, and I'm curious about what you've noticed thus far with Pluto being solidly in Aquarius now, and that shift just happened November 19th, and now Pluto's in Aquarius until what?
2044, I think.
2044. Yeah, so about 20 years. And yeah, I just lost my train of thought, but curious about what you're noticing with Pluto and Aquarius.
Well, I mean, a lot of what I'm noticing is, I think, strangeness and people willing to reclaim strangeness, is kind of to your point about Aquarius. And, just from the sort of the outer world perspective too, there's just, what do I say? Like, people are talking more about things like pattern recognition, which is definitely an Aquarian thing. I think astrology itself is we're starting to see the shadows of some of these things, because of course that's what Pluto's job is to bring up some of the things that need to be like brought up from the depths and the darkness so that we can deal with them. And I think we're starting to see that in astrology. And I think we have been for a while. We're seeing an explosion of it as well. And just like a lot of questioning about our role in society, which is, I think, long overdue. Because that whole thing about authenticity and sovereignty is kind of detaching from groupthink, right? Aquarian groupthink, and starting to come back to who am I authentically and not how do I fit in, because that's the wrong question. It's more like, how can I be so much myself that I become that thread in the tapestry of the whole?
Mm, well said. Yeah, and my observations are just are more immediate and personal, and just noticing a kind of loosening up of energy and things moving more quickly. And just very soon after Pluto went back into Aquarius, I was introduced to this quantum frequency healing, these products. It's Leela Quantum Tech. No, I'm not an affiliate, whatever. But I'm loving their frequency healing products, and it feels so Pluto and Aquarius. And then a couple of days ago, a friend of mine is now selling, part of the business, selling another kind of frequency healing, a kind of patch that you put on that stimulates your stem cells. So just noticing more attention on frequency coming out of that Pluto and Capricorn kind of density of matter. Capricorn is an earth sign, and where things might have felt more stuck and slow and stagnant, and now feeling like, oh, more possibilities and looser. And also for me, just noticing more extroversion, more connections coming in, more kind of sparky synchronistic connections with people, which is, again, very welcome after being in deep hermitude with Pluto and Capricorn.
Well, and I might say that personally, I might not notice that stuff for a little while because it's still so close to my descendant, and I've been Plutoized for so long.
Yeah.
But to your point about that, one of the things I'm noticing is a lot more quantum, right? That word is showing up in more places, and that there's been such an explosion of energy healing and different kinds of energy healing, and that's one of my predictions with Pluto and Aquarius is we'll finally see that get its due as we start to get more mainstream recognition that we're energetic beings. And that whole, I really think there's a big, in fact, this is part of the outer planet shift too, is that we're shifting from a very materialistic, mechanistic view of the world to a more energetic, I don't, quantum is hard for me to like put words to, but more of an understanding of the multidimensional um, existence that we have, right? And I think that's what's really starting to explode is that understanding of it. And it hasn't hit the mainstream yet, but I think that's coming. Or it started to. I shouldn't say it hasn't, it's just started to.
Yes, absolutely. And what I want to say too, in terms of the beginning of this year and a big activation of that Pluto and Aquarius, the Sun and Pluto have not yet met in Aquarius. The previous times when Pluto came into Aquarius, it did not meet up with the Sun. And that's going to happen on January 21st. And I feel like that's a big like fertilization or setting off or lighting up acceleration around this Aquarian influence. And of course, that's right when the Sun comes into Aquarius, and we start Aquarius season. And this is the first full Aquarius season with the Sun Pluto conjunction in Aquarius. And so I feel like the kinds of things we're talking about, the kinds of things we're noticing in Pluto and Aquarius are about to launch big time
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Aquarius season.
That's a great way. Yeah, that's a great reminder in terms of timing because the sun is such a trigger. Yeah. Mars is a trigger too, so we've been seeing a little bit of that, but yeah, that's
But then we're too triggered to notice anything. So no, not necessarily. But yeah, so should we talk about the North Node
yes.
shifting, since that's our first big sign shift of the year?
It's exactly where I wanted to go. Do you want to start? I mean, go for it if you've got, because I'm sure we both have lots to say on the topic, but go
Yeah,
for
and I do want to mention that I'm part of a Astro Priestess 2025 Astrology Summit, which I think I don't even know when it launches. I think at the end of this month or early February. I'm going to send something out about it later this week. But my whole presentation for that was about the North Node in Pisces. And I talked with Jamie Goldstein, who was born with the North Node in Pisces, and we talked for like an hour and a half. We went very Pisces. It was, goodbye time boundaries. So just so you know, a very thorough analysis is out there and will be available soon. And the summit's totally free and all of that. So I'll have info about that soon. So, but the first thing that strikes me as so fascinating about the North Node moving into Pisces for 2025 is, again, all the slow moving planets are moving into masculine signs.
it.
Pisces, I think of as the ultimate yin. It's so yin because Pisces is the exaltation of Venus, the feminine. This is Venus's favorite place to be. And Piscean energy, this is water. This is the last of the water signs. It's about surrender and trust and going with the flow. And I don't even know if I thought about this before the summit, before I did that summit interview, but what I'm thinking too is that Pisces is our unconscious and the collective unconscious. In other words, deep inner world. So I think this is also it's a reminder not only to balance out that masculine go 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 kind of energy with more of the feminine, but also a reminder that ultimately it all comes from within. And as things speed up out there, as life becomes faster and more happening, and I think even like media and information, and it's we know it's already crazy. It's getting crazier. It's getting a lot crazier, and AI and all that, like crazy, crazy, crazy. To remember that ultimately our power comes from within ourselves. And just let me back up a little all over the place here, but that the North Node signifies how we can best evolve, how we can step into our highest future personally and collectively. So the sign that the North Node is moving through, I see as like something we can keep coming back to and leaning into. I also thought it was cool as I was kind of researching the North Node, and just to say too that this has about a 19-year cycle, and the last time that the North Node was in Pisces was from June of 2006 to December 2007. And I think it's so cool that some of, the greatest spiritual teachers were born with the North Node in Pisces: Krishnamurti, Gurdjieff, Edgar Cayce, Nostradamus, and
Mm.
also Dane Rudhyar, our great humanistic astrologer, who was born not only with the North Node in Pisces, but also Jupiter in Cancer. And Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces, and Jupiter is going into Cancer later this year. Actually, no, Dane Rudhyar was born with Jupiter in Gemini, where it is now. Buckminster Fuller, who's another favorite North Node in Pisces native, he was born with Jupiter in Cancer, and Krishnamurti. So
And the Pisces North Node.
Pisces North Node. Yep.
Wow, that is cool. Yeah, because I think of it as like that. I mean, I think of the nodes as a portal, right? But North Node energy coming in, South Node energy going out, just very simplistic. And it's just this really deep connection with the divine or with our field that we're all part of. I mean, whatever, with the ocean of consciousness, whatever phrasing resonates with you. And yes, we experience it through within. And it is interesting that it provides the backdrop for this first year and a half of these outer planets moving into all masculine signs. Um, and I'm curious what you think of this too, because the other thing that's coming to me is that it's like this is a period of spiritual digestion, trying to digest spiritually at the spiritual level all the experience of even maybe the last 18 years, and certainly all the change that we've been through. And I think the one, well, one of the shadows I'm most concerned about is, well, I shouldn't put it that way. I'm not concerned about it. I think it's an opportunity if we're aware of it, is there's like a tremendous porosity, right, that comes with Pisces, right? That there's the veils are even thinner. It's maybe a little harder to get our sense of ourselves unless we're also doing the Virgo piece, the embodiment piece. I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think this also is reflected in the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune that we're
Yes.
coming into this year and next year, where Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces, and the sign Pisces, and then Jupiter is going to move into Cancer, another water sign, Jupiter, traditional ruler of Pisces. There's a lot of sensitivity. And right, this heightens our sensitivity, and particularly like you're talking about, like our sensitivity to the collective field and that porousness to what's coming in. And I think this is, on the one hand, this is a call for discernment, right? Not like using the positive of the South Node with being very discerning and discerning about what we take in. If we know that we're going to be more porous and sensitive to the field, then I mean, Virgo Pisces is the axis of purification. And this isn't about being super nitpicky, South Node and Virgo. Oh, I can't eat this and I can't touch this and don't, it's not like that, but more like that sense of what's coming in energetically and emotionally. What do we allow in our fields? Because we're going to be more sensitive to that. And then thinking about Saturn and Neptune coming together, Saturn, boundaries, Saturn, grounding, Saturn, reality check, Neptune, this diffuse, porous, sensitive, dreamy, potentially all over the place kind of energy. And Saturn is saying, Saturn's the principle of necessity. It's necessary to, I don't want to say protect, because it's not. I think part of the potential shadow is really shutting down that sensitivity because it feels like too much, but more like having a strong container in which we can do that deep Piscean opening and surrendering and letting go. And also, I think this is about the power. I mean, this will be Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries, the power of sensitivity and vulnerability and our inner work and our spiritual work, and really owning that power. I mean, I think this is a time for the sensitives, the highly sensitive people, to step out and not be, oh, I have to hide from the world because I'm too sensitive. Like, no. No, we're the ones needed
I
taking
couldn't agree with
action.
that more because that's the other thing that I'm kind of seeing, I guess I would say, is that the sensitive people, the highly sensitive people, the super intuitive people are the ones that are going to be able to discern the bullshit from reality, because we're in a time of deep fakes, right? Especially if you're doing stuff online. We all know that, and AI is magnifying that. And you're not going to be able to figure it out in your mind what's real and what's not. And so the sensitivity that's born and grounded in the body is what's going to be the superpower that helps people navigate this incredible time we're coming into. I think that's one of the other major gifts of this Pisces Virgo axis, is that integration of spiritual and material, which is what I think of as the like the higher purpose of the nodes in that area. And yeah, I think that's the powers of discernment, without putting up boundaries. And I guess I'll say one more thing about that. When I think about Saturn, I think about integrity, internal integrity, and the fact that it rules the skeleton and it rules the skin as well, but it rules kind of the structure of the body. And when you are one person I've interviewed that I love the way he puts it, it's about coming back to your sacred center. And when you're really centered and aligned in yourself, which is what we've been talking about with the Aries energy and the authenticity and like knowing your own frequency, then it's less about having a fence or a boundary around you, and it's more about being able to discern what is me and what is not me.
Yeah, I think that's all right on. And I think this is a big test,
Yeah.
Saturn, of our spiritual integrity, being right with ourselves and what we know and what we're sensing and what we're perceiving, and standing strong in that. Because again, this is Aries, this is calling for courage. Like, yeah. And I just, speaking of Saturn, I just want to throw in some timing around all of this. So again, the North Node goes into Pisces on January 11th, and it'll be there until July 26th of 2026. And then we've been talking about Saturn and Aries, Saturn and Neptune going into Aries. Neptune goes into Aries on March 30th and is there until October 22nd. And then it will come back into Aries on January 26th, 2026, and be there until 2039. And this is a super big deal because Neptune, none of us have been alive before when Neptune was in Aries. The last time Neptune was in Aries was 1875. So this is, this is epic, and this is where I'm going to be really tuning in on March 30th. And, in this glimpse that we're going to get of it this year, well, it's actually quite a long time, March 30th to October 22nd, but really feeling into how does that feel? What's that all about? And then Saturn goes into Aries on May 24th, and we get a little glimpse of that until September 1st. This will be the first time since 1999. Saturn's cycle is 29 years. It's not as epic a sign change as Neptune. And then it'll come back into Aries on February 14th, 2026, and be there until 2028. And what's going to happen this year is that Saturn and Neptune are going to get very close. They're going to be at the same degree, but not to the minute. So just for those not so familiar with the astrotechno, each sign is broken up into 30 degrees. Each degree is broken up into 60 minutes. So Saturn and Neptune will effectively be conjunct this year, but they will be exact, precisely to the minute conjunct on February 20th, 2026. And that's going to happen at 0 Aries, the very first degree of the zodiac. Super big deal. And I just want to say, for those of you who know your chart, who have a copy of your chart, the Aries part of your chart is going gangbusters starting this year, but especially next year. Saturn moving there, Neptune moving in there, Venus and Mercury going retrograde in Aries early this year. So the Aries part of your chart super highlighted, and also the Pisces part of your chart. And this is something that I want to say in terms of this year. Okay, we've got 3, for whatever. We have a lot of sign changes, all the slow moving planets changing signs. We haven't even gotten to Uranus yet. But they're all coming back. They're not staying in those signs. They're all coming back out of those signs. And it'll be next year when they're all fully in the new sign. And so to see this year as this huge transitional time where we get a glimpse of the new and put our big toe into the new stories, and then we come back into we're not quite ready for that, actually. There's more to do here. And again, there's a very strong focus on Aries first sign, Pisces last sign. Oh, yay, Aries, it's all new. Let's go. Woohoo. Oh, no, we're going back. And to think about, too, that this means that all the slow moving planets at the 29th degree of their sign, backy forthy, the last degree, the anaretic degree, considered extreme energy. So to really think about this year as having a strong emphasis on completions, on endings, the 29th degree, especially the 29th degree of Pisces, which both Saturn and Neptune are going to be transiting. So there's a lot that's washing away. And here again is where I think it's really helpful to lean into the North Node in Pisces in terms of seeing the bigger picture and the higher vision and the spiritual perspective on what's happening, because the Virgo South Node is where we can see what's wrong with this picture, what's wrong with the world, what's wrong with me, what things aren't going well. It means I'm not working hard enough and I'm not good enough and I have to beat myself up and feel guilty and rah, 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 rah. Not helpful, not helpful. We want to lean into that Piscean, like, let's step back. How would the divine see this? How will I see this in 100 years? What's the bigger mysterious unfolding? How can I trust that, bring in more trust and spaciousness and go deep within to get out of that, like, everything's wrong and
Yeah, and as you were saying that, I was thinking it's another illustration of that materialist mechanical view, right? Which would be the shadow of Virgo, and versus understanding that we're all part of a greater whole and understanding. I don't like the kind of the meme about, we're all spiritual beings having a human experience, but if I could get myself out of the dislike of the meme, there's some truth to that, right? That we're both and and it's interesting to me again that this is the backdrop with all this other change. But the other thing is back to the Saturn Neptune dance is that they spend a lot of time within a degree, I think, of each other in Pisces. And to me, this is one of the things we've been seeing with Saturn and Pisces since what, March of 2023, wasn't it? Is like this, I think this was kind of the where we really are seeing the deep fakes, right? That it's difficult to see that the fake looks real. The fantasy looks real. Fantasy on the screen, right, is becoming more and more and more and more realistic. And somebody, I haven't seen it yet, but somebody talked about watching a video the other day that they couldn't tell was an AI generated video of a person.
right.
And that's been sort of Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, and then they have this dance together for a while before they flip into Aries, and then come back separately, and then they don't, as you say, they don't do their final meeting until 2026 at zero Aries, which, by the way, somebody else said hasn't happened since like 800 BC or something like that. Neptune and Saturn come together every 37 years ish, but it hasn't happened at zero Aries for in yeah, in memory, in history. I'm sure it's happened, right? But just not in history.
Right. Yeah, it's very profound. Yeah, and just for reference, the last time they came together was in 1989 in the sign Capricorn, and that was the basically the end of Eastern European
Right.
communism, follow the Berlin Wall, blah blah blah. So a very big deal. And Uranus at that was also in Capricorn, so that was a bigger deal in that way. But yeah, this is something bringing. We know there's going to be we're bringing in something brand new with that Saturn Neptune conjunction at zero Aries. And I think, like you're saying, all this emphasis at the end of Pisces, and I would also consider Saturn as the traditional ruler of Aquarius, the dispositor of Pluto in Aquarius. So, and as we know, part of the distortion of Pluto in Aquarius is uh, control and power over domination through technology, like
Right.
technocracy, for example. And so Saturn in Pisces as the dispositor, as the ruler of that Aquarian energy, that's where we see all this potential for illusion and deception. Let's just call it deception
Yep.
in through technology and through our screens and through what we're seeing on the internet. And again, this is where the North Node in Pisces, I think, calling us back to our inner world, like you said, to in order to discern what's real, what's not real, but also I think just to, as we know, where our attention goes, energy flows. And as long as all of our attention is hooked into the screen and we get really invested in that quote reality, and I guess it's an entity, it is a reality, but we ignore our inner reality to our detriment because that's where the real power is and that's where our creative power is. And we want to remember Pisces is about the imagination. And part of the problem, let's say, with spending all our time watching the screen and watching movies and television is that we're being literally programmed with an imagination, with what the future Aquarius is going to look like versus pulling our energy in and creating our own. What's the future I want to create? What can I dream up? And so this is, and like you said, Saturn and Neptune traveling together in Pisces, the necessity, Saturn, of using our imagination, like owning our imagination and harnessing the power of our imagination and the authority of our imagination versus letting our consciousness be hijacked by the external, and again, especially by technology, by the screen. And we talked about frequencies with Pluto and Aquarius. We're in a frequency war. Let me
Right.
just say it, right? We're bombarded with very anti-life frequencies, and I think also mind frequencies 24/7. And this is where we have to get really smart in terms of what we're doing on a frequency level. And I think human consciousness is more powerful than any of that bullshit. But if we don't know that we're more powerful, we know that our beliefs control our biology. So if we don't know our power, coming back to the Aries discussion, if we don't know how powerful we are as individuals, and especially at the level of consciousness, then we become victim to, I mean, one of the ways we can think about Pluto, and Jeff Jower called Pluto the big bad wolf, right? Or, right. So the big bad wolf, Pluto in Aquarius, is technology and is frequency. And the reverse is true too. This is also, Pluto ultimately is about our empowerment, or if we choose to go in that direction, it's about empowering ourselves. So empowering ourselves at the frequency level. And that's all about the inner world and the power of our consciousness, our
Yeah,
minds.
I have to add too, because it's kind of what we've been talking about is that if you're not deeply connected with your body, you're at much greater risk, right? Because the body is what grounds you to reality. The body is always in the here and now. And it speaks, right? The body is it speaks. And if we're not listening and connected, and I would say, I think this is also a really important time to get realigned with natural cycles. And that's the higher expression of Virgo, is that daily routine that's tied into the earth, right? And I think that's another thing to be thinking about. But that's why I say embodiment is it's not just the survival strategy, it's the thrive strategy. It's what will make the difference between getting lost in the fakery, and getting your attention pulled off, and feeding the monster, right? That's how we feed the monster, is we read the dystopian stuff. We look at the news and we take it as reality. When you look at it all as theater and stay centered in your own experience, that's when you can really thrive through all this craziness.
Yeah, well said. And I would say maybe especially in the body, the heart really leaning into the polarity of Aquarius, which is Leo and the heart, and our center. As you were talking about our center before, Leo, thinking about Leo ruled by the sun, right? As
Right.
the center and our inner center. And that's our place of discernment, discerning with our hearts versus our minds, and also being present. We can only be in present time if we're in the heart. And I think it's really good, and I love that you keep coming back to embodiment, because again, with the slow moving planets all in masculine signs, that's air, the mind, Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, which we'll get to. That's so huge mental activation where we can just live in our heads and be so seduced by all the ideas and concepts and abstract whatever, blah, blah, blah. And fire, Aries, which also fire can live very mythically, live in the realm of myth versus embodied experience. And so, yeah, keep coming back to the body, very important. Should we talk about Uranus and Gemini, or actually Jupiter goes into Cancer before that? Should we go to Jupiter?
I'd like to talk about both, and I'd also like to, before we finish today, we might go a little bit over if that's okay with you. I'd also like to talk about the relationship between the planets, what they're calling the minor
Right.
triangle, right? Because that, again, I mean, that happens every 500 years, but it hasn't happened, or is it 500 years maybe with Neptune, but it hasn't happened at these like first degrees of the signs, again, for very, like, in history.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, uh, so should we talk about Uranus then?
Yes, let's talk about Uranus.
Okay. So, July 7th until November 7th, this is our preview of Uranus in Gemini. And this is the first time Uranus has been in Gemini since 1949. So for many of us, this is brand new. Again, brand new. And after Uranus re-enters Gemini April 26th next year, and then we'll be there until 2033. So Uranus has been in Taurus, is still in Taurus since 2018. And that's kind of a weird combination because Taurus is very earth, Uranus is the sky god, right? Uranus all about fast change, acceleration, blah. Taurus likes to move slowly. And this is where what my revelation early on with Uranus and Taurus was it's radical to slow down, and the real revolution happens when we slow way down and connect with Earth and follow the natural cycles. But Uranus and Gemini just feels like a whole new a whole new realm. It's kind of cool because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So there is like a natural, I think, I don't go with rulerships for outer planets or exaltations or falls or any of that, what I think of as nonsense. But there, I can certainly feel like a strong affinity between the Uranus archetype and the Gemini archetype. And that this feels like, if Uranus is about acceleration, radical change, I think the higher potential here is like an incredible mental breakthrough and breaking free. And because this does cooperate, as Christine briefly mentioned, we'll come back to, but is cooperating, harmonizing with Pluto and Aquarius and Saturn and Neptune in Aries, this is where like breaking free from groupthink and liberating the mind and having these incredible revelations, and also really being called to speak our truth. Uranus is also a lot about truth. Uranus is the planet associated with being uniquely ourselves and giving our, like what I and only I came here to do, our unique genius. And so in Gemini, it's like we've got something to say, we've got something to express, we want to share it with the world. What do you think, Christine?
I think we've seen a little bit of a preview of this with Jupiter in Gemini. My personal view is that some of it has been a little bit more obvious since the election, but it's like the not blinders, but the way that the sensors have kind of started coming off. I see way more people speaking up that haven't felt like they could for years now. And so I think it's starting to happen. And I think that with Jupiter and Gemini, there's been like this, almost like, again, like this plethora of ideas, this magnification of ideas. And even the AI is on what do they call it? A large language model or something, where they're basically, AI is taking all the words and then putting it back together to create its own in many ways. And I think that's been Jupiter in Gemini giving us a preview of Uranus. And I also, the other thing that has really struck me with the Uranus and Gemini is it's almost like we don't know how to think beyond what we've been told we can think, right? There's been limitations on what we can think and the ideas we can have. And it feels like Uranus is going to take all the sideboards off. And that what you think is possible right now is going to be so tiny compared to what is truly possible. And to me, that's what this whole minor triangle and this whole period is about, is the realm of possibility is so narrow and so limited right now. And it's going to be, Uranus is breaks, right? Breakthroughs and
Shattering.
shattering. Exactly.
Shattering the old limits. Yeah, I think, what you're saying about Jupiter and Gemini, I mean, Jupiter and Gemini has been a little weird because it's been squaring Saturn
Yeah.
pretty much the whole time. And also Jupiter, that's the sign opposite its home sign, so it's exile, not its favorite place to be, not its strongest place. But I think, yeah, I think that's a really good insight that we've been preparing maybe for Uranus and Gemini. If Uranus and Gemini wants us to shatter all the old mental limits and go beyond what we thought was possible or what we had imagined before, which I think is right in line with Pluto and Aquarius. As Jupiter in Gemini, just for reference, Jupiter went into Gemini in June. Can't remember the date, but end of June maybe. And we'll be there until like end of June, 1st of July next year. 1st of July? No, June 9th next year.
I was
We'll
going to
come
say I
back
have
to
a
that.
date somewhere, but
I found it June 9th, Jupiter goes into Cancer. But this whole time, Jupiter has been squaring Saturn. And maybe, and part of what that's about is showing us where we are too limited and contracted and defended Saturn in terms of our perspective and open-mindedness and willingness to entertain different ways of seeing. And I also think of it, with Saturn in Pisces as wanting to dissolve those old limitations and open us up more to, get out of the duality of the this, that, and especially with Jupiter and Gemini, I'm right, you're wrong. We're seeing this all over the place, the polarization, it's this or it's that, it's this or that, this or that, this, where Pisces is like, hello, what's the third that's beyond all of this, or what's the bigger view that can hold all of those dualities and polarities and kind of bring us beyond that. So I like that. Yeah, our preparation for Uranus going into Gemini, which is pretty cool to think about too, considering that the final square between Jupiter and Saturn is June 15th, just 3 weeks before Uranus goes into Gemini on July 7th. So yeah, good insight.
and before you go on too, I think it's also helpful to remind everybody that the Jupiter Saturn square is the first square since the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, the great mutation, right, of December solstice 2020, which began this whole new cycle of air in air signs, the conjunctions in air signs for 200 years. And now we have Uranus and Pluto Uranus and Pluto moving into air signs. And so it's like we're at the beginning of we're literally at the beginning of a new age, right? And the Jupiter Saturn has been sort of that first kind of like, what are the issues, what's in tension with each other, and that's
What's holding us back?
what's holding us back. Yep.
Yeah. And it's exciting because I think that third and final square between Jupiter and Saturn, which will be at, coming back to the 1 degree theme, that will be at 1 degree of Cancer and Aries. I feel like that's the big ta-da. And just for review, the first exact square between Jupiter and Saturn was in August, I think around the 18th. in Gemini and Pisces, and the second one just happened on December 24th. Gemini
Yeah.
Pisces, and then we have this third and final one, which I think feels very different energetically. And this is part of that difference is that this is Jupiter in its exaltation in Cancer, super powerful. And this can be like the manifestation of what we've been working on for that, for, this is in effect for about a year. And the third one is usually the grand finale when both planets will be moving forward as well, since for the first one, Saturn was retrograde, second one, Jupiter was retrograde, third and final one, they're both moving forward. And there's that cardinal initiatory energy, very, action oriented time to, you know,
Yeah, and
move
somebody, I can't
forward.
remember who it was, but somebody had talked about, that Jupiter and Gemini, multiplicity of ideas, right? But Jupiter and Cancer, nurturing and gestating the most important idea. And it's also when Jupiter really starts to move away from Saturn, right? Starts to really get out of Saturn's clutches, if you will. So yeah, it's like if so thinking about how this relates to people personally, if you know where Gemini is in your chart, that's where there's maybe been a whole lot of stuff coming up. And wherever Cancer is in your chart is where the new beginnings can really start from a Jupiter standpoint. And of course, as you said, Aries is like where I mean everything new in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Jupiter being in Cancer, and again, Jupiter being the traditional ruler of Pisces, where the North Node is going, and where we'll have more eclipses. Um, this is again really bringing us into our hearts and feeling for the truth. Jupiter is the planet of the truth. How do we know what's true? Through our felt, instinctual sense. And Cancer is ruled by the moon, I think, very much connected with the body.
Right.
I mean, so it's a water sign, but it's a very, very personal feeling our way forward and connected with the natural rhythms and the natural cycles. And yeah, and really bringing in that strong nurturing energy to grow what has been gestating. Also thinking about Jupiter in Cancer, that means while Saturn's in Pisces, when Saturn goes back into Pisces, they're in harmony instead of in conflict. We get the trine instead of the square later in the year and early
Right.
next year. Yeah. Do you want to show that chart with the 1 degree happening?
Yeah. Are you thinking about the one I was mentioning at the Virgo new?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me find that and then do a share. Can you see it?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So, trying to get yeah. Um, yeah, so I picked this chart because I mean it's a new moon. The full moon previous is also a big deal, but I picked this chart because to me it had the pretty dramatic showing of Pluto at 1, Neptune at 1, Uranus at 1, and Saturn right there. I mean, they're within a degree of each other. Um, and at the new moon itself, which is its own. And I think it's interesting that the new moon is at 0 degrees as well. So this is another kind of initiatory period. And it's
Well,
not eclipse, but it opens eclipse season.
right, because we're gonna this year we'll have a second new moon in Virgo, which will be a solar eclipse at the 29th degree, the very last degree of Virgo. So we get double Virgo new moon action happening here. But yeah, do you want to, yeah, what do you want to say about this?
Well, I
What you
think what,
call
maybe what I like about this chart, besides the activation potential, is it's a good illustration of this what they call minor triangle, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, that you've got the trine between Pluto and Uranus, as we talked about, so they're cooperating. But then there's also this cooperation with Neptune. So it's like not only do we have these outer planets shifting within the same time frame, within what, like 8 months, which is super, it's just not done, right? It doesn't happen like this. They don't do this together like that. And not only are they shifting into new signs, but they're all masculine signs, and there's this real spirit of cooperation that I find really interesting. And I don't honestly know what to say about it, except that I don't know. I'm still trying to unpack, like, what would I say about all these outer planets working in harmony with each other in these masculine signs, and except that some of the things that you've already said and I've already said, the pace of change, and it's like there's just a real energy of new beginnings before we back up towards the end of the year and then come into it all again in 2026 for real.
Right. I mean, and it is interesting that this is Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune all retrograde as well, already starting, heading backwards. But to me, it feels like the key is really what we were talking about with Aries, with this Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Because of course, just because planets are cooperating with each other does not mean the outcome is positive. It just means they're cooperating with each other. And I like to quote Stephen Forrest in I think it's in The Inner Sky, where he talks about like the trine aspect, or a positive aspect where one drunk is convincing the other drunk that it's a good idea to go get another drink, and they're like, "Yeah, great, we're in harmony, we're flowing together, cool." Is that positive? Not necessarily. So what I see as a big shadow potential here would be, I mean, the thing with this Uranus and Gemini plus Pluto and Aquarius, the potential for, and again, we've had a little taste of this with Jupiter and Gemini. I can certainly relate. Mind all over the freaking place. And I think
Right.
even stronger with Uranus and Gemini, total distraction, right? Just being pulled, Pluto and Aquarius, the technology pulling our minds in all different directions. So we're just like scattered, not in our bodies, confused, all over the place. And then if we're coming from, and that can really feed into, again, then we become more like like victims of frequency, or victims of media, or victims of collective mind craziness. And then we know ourselves, Aries, as victims, Saturn, Neptune. Neptune, the distortion shadow of that archetype is the victim. And Saturn can get right on board with that and say, "You're right, I'm powerless. There's nothing I can do here." And where I think the higher potential, if we know who we really are, if we know how powerful we are and know how powerful we are at the consciousness level, and we're really centered and in integrity with our soul's calling and divine mission and who we are as infinite spiritual beings, then this is where our minds can just absolutely take off in the most empowering, liberating directions. There's a lot of potential freedom here, right? Uranus is the planet of freedom. Aquarius is the sign of freedom. Aries is a lot about personal freedom and sovereignty. This could be incredibly liberating. And again, I think the key, and what we've been preparing for with Chiron and Aries, with North Node and these eclipses in Aries, is this moment.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I love that you just said that. We're preparing for this. And the other thing too is understanding that you said it earlier, about attention, but your attention is power. Your attention is a form of love. And that whole thing about where your attention goes, and our in Ayurveda, prana follows life, for or life, yeah, prana at any rate. I'm trying to say the same thing. I mean, where you put your attention is where you're putting your life force. And that's one of the dangers of this online world. And for instance, one of the smaller things I see, maybe not that small, both with Pluto into Aquarius and Uranus into Gemini, is like the splintering of social media. right? Right now, you could go find your own echo chamber. You can go on X for one kind of echo chamber. You can go on Blue Sky for another kind of echo chamber. And, and then all of them are built to kind of commodify your attention. That's what this is about, right? I mean, all of us, it's what I'm doing, right? I want to get your attention to my site so that you'll come and be part of my community. And that's what we all do. So your attention, if you remember that that is one of your greatest superpowers and greatest gifts, it's about trying to remember, where do you want to put your attention? Just like with this Mars retrograde, where do you want to put your energy? But even more so with that, with this kind of stuff happening, where does your attention go? And
Yeah.
I don't know if we have time. I guess we'll have to decide if we have time, but I think that's another interesting thing in terms of this first 6 months of the year. I'll stop this unless you've got more to say about this share, but we have a Mercury retrograde overlapping with a Venus retrograde.
I want to say just a little bit more with this Saturn Neptune in Aries, because Neptune is where we tend to project God,
Mm.
right? So, and Aries is the hero. And so Neptune in Aries could be, and with this configuration, it could be like, this is the hero who's going to save us. I'm
Messiah.
going to project all my power out there to that guy or that girl or whatever who's going to like make it all okay. And this is where it's really important to take responsibility, Saturn,
Yeah.
and ownership for being our own hero, because where Neptune gets in trouble is where we project it outside of ourselves. So this is about really being the hero, knowing the power of the individual, and that individual is me. And then that individual is you, but it's not about me looking to you or any you out there to save me and make it all better. And I can see a big, media fake something play to get us to put our precious attention in that direction. And that's a total illusion.
Yeah, and I think actually that's a really good point, because I think when I don't have a chart for it, but when we have that big Pisces lineup, I have the date somewhere, but I don't know when it is. We have a big Pisces lineup of Saturn and Neptune and the North Node and Venus in February, I think, of this year.
Yeah.
Everybody is there together at the same time. I think that's also like the same sort of, especially with the North Node there, there's that potential for looking for a Messiah, right?
Yes.
That's and that's similar to that Saturn, Neptune, and Aries looking for the hero. So it does really speak to not looking out there for somebody to save us, definitely, because that will be part of, I think. I mean, we already see it. We see it with the presidential elections, right? Is that this person is going to save us, that person is going to save us, and it's all hero and messiah making. And it's, if you look at the news, especially as theater, it's really interesting to see these stories come and go if you cannot get wrapped up into believing them, right? And taking them as truth, because they all have agendas. They're all part of the programming. And you're not going to know what's true just by reading or watching a story, obviously, these
And
days.
again, it's a big distraction from our true locus of power within ourselves and in our own lives.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about this chart?
No, I'm happy to move on. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Feels like there's so much more, right? What else is on your list? Because I actually, maybe if we've got, I know we're over, but maybe a couple minutes about the overlapping Venus and Mercury retrogrades, because I think that's another it, because they're all in the same part of the sky.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how those two are coinciding and overlapping. And so just to say, like, in terms of the slow start to 2025, not only do we have Mars retrograde, but Venus is already slowing down. Venus goes into her retrograde shadow on January 28th.
Mm.
And this will be Venus starting out in Aries, going back to Pisces. Again, this is part of this big Aries Pisces backy forthy theme of this year. And so Venus officially goes retrograde on March 1st until April 12th. So this is where Mars has just come out of retrograde, but we're still very much in the Mars retrograde shadow until May 3rd, and we're in the Venus retrograde shadow until May 16th. So again, this is where I'm saying the year really gets going in May. um, and yeah, like Christine said, this is super weird. I don't know that I've ever seen this before, but that Mercury will retrograde in the same, like also start in Aries, go back to Pisces right around the same time. I don't have the Mercury retro dates in front of me. Do you, Christine?
No, I don't think I do. I think I just, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I do.
Right around March 15th or so, it looks like Mercury goes retrograde.
Funny because I
But
know
at
this
it's
down.
at Mercury goes retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries. Venus goes retrograde at 10 degrees of Aries. I mean,
Yeah,
this is just craziness. So and this is interesting too because they're combined retrogrades. And again, remember, we're still in the field of Mars retrograde. That all happens right around spring equinox. So not only do we have a weird like January of the new year, kind of not so much, but spring equinox, which some of us think of as the real let's get this party started for the year. No, we're not getting this party started.
right. And it's funny too because Mercury was retrograde during Mars' retrograde as well, even though in a
Yeah.
different place. Actually, yeah, in a different place. But so there, these retrogrades, I've been thinking of them as, we're coming into this huge, big shift. Everything's going to feel new and maybe a little bit crazy. And the retrogrades are asking us to kind of come back, slow down, and reevaluate, right? The Mars retrograde, as we talked about, same with Venus, but in a different way, sort of reevaluating, and then Mercury rethinking. So it's as if, and even with the Saturn Jupiter, it's as if there's a series of putting the brakes on and slowing things down in preparation for, yeah, everything's going to get nuts. Everything's going to be different. Lots of things are just going to be bursting wide open. So come back, come home, come back to yourself, get really clear about who you are, what you want to put your energy to, what you value, Venus, what rethinking, and it's almost like these digestion periods before we go into like the whole new full meal deal of 2025, 2026.
Yeah, big inner preparation for these shifts. And again, especially having to do with Aries. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's a very big deal that it's Mercury and Venus going retrograde in Aries, which is ruled by Mars, which is still in retrograde or in this retrograde shadow, right? It's all pointing to who am I, and the fact that they're all going back to Pisces, or that, well, that Venus and Mercury are sort of mirroring what's happening with the collective planets, with Saturn and Neptune going from Aries back to Pisces. This is feeling it on a very personal level and feeling, who am I? We go back to Pisces. I am source. I am infinite. I am an infinite, limitless being. That's who I really am. And that's our preparation for knowing who we are, and like you said, what our priorities are. And Venus retrograde, definitely a big reevaluation around our values. What do I really love? What is my bottom line priority? And Venus and Aries, how do I love myself?
Yeah.
Because we need that. We need our, like, said something along those lines of beginning. I deserve to exist. Venus is our deservingness and havingness and worthiness.
Yes. That almost feels like a great place to wrap up.
Let's do it. You know what? I think we did pretty well considering considering everything that's happening this year. And of course, we'll keep digging in as the year moves along. But I think we did pretty well for an overview with as Mercury squares Neptune in the sky. Thank you, Mary and Jessica.
Covered a lot. We covered a lot of ground. And there's, yeah, it's a lot. And it's just that, yeah, keep coming back to yourself. Keep coming back to yourself over and over. What I can't remember. So you announced that you've got the Astro Priestess Summit, right? So that's
Yes.
coming up, and all if you have a link, I could put that in the show notes, but otherwise you can those of you that are listening later, or even those of you that are here, if you find me and Emily on Substack or through our respective websites and sign up for newsletters, you'll find out about what's coming up. But what else? So the Astro Priestess.
Yeah, and then at summer solstice, which I know we didn't talk about, but I'll just say briefly how epic the summer solstice is. Not only does it follow just after the final Jupiter-Saturn square, this will be the first summer solstice. So that, and astrologically, the summer solstice is when the sun moves into Cancer. And this is, of course, the longest day and the power of the sun, celebration of the power of the sun. And this will be the first Cancer solstice where the sun is together with Jupiter in Cancer since 1990. And in 1990, it wasn't a close conjunction, but they were co-present in Cancer. So this will be the sun comes into Cancer, conjunct Jupiter, both of them squaring Saturn, Neptune in Aries. So I'm getting together with I have a distant cousin who's amazing, Elizabeth Trinkaus. We call each other ET. And she's a life coach, and she's been doing leading retreats for like 20 years, and she's all about shining your light. So we're doing a weekend retreat in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Hi, Mary, where Elizabeth lives. And it's all about this solstice energy and shining our light. And I'm thinking about the sun and Jupiter together in Cancer, squaring Saturn, Neptune in Aries as redreaming
Mm.
Saturn, Neptune, redreaming our heroine's journey. That's the sun. And this Sun Jupiter conjunction is calling us into our light at more, in a big way, and to take risks, the risk of being ourselves, the risk of shining more brightly. And Saturn and Neptune and Aries are saying we need to redream our sense of who we are. So that's happening June 20th to 22nd in Chapel Hill. It's on my website, so I haven't officially started promoting it yet, but I will soon. So, and live and in person, it's just for 12 women. It'll be a pretty intimate retreat. So that's what I've got coming up.
Cool. That sounds really great. Yeah, and for just for mine, this Friday, January 10th, I'm going to be doing a longer version of kind of unpacking the astrology of the year, but also talking about some of the tactics to thrive. We'll do a few experiential things, and I'll be talking about the workshops I've got planned, at least through the first quarter, to help us all get aligned with ourselves. And it's free. It's for anybody on my list. If you're on my list, you'll be getting the link. You don't have to be a paid member, but I will be talking about what comes up for that. So, and tomorrow, oh gosh, tomorrow, if you're on Facebook, I will be going live in the Living from the Core embodiment convergence group on Facebook to do just a quick snapshot of what's happening and go into a more deep, longer meditation to connect with yourself. So that I'll put the link to that because you'll be able to watch it anytime you join the Facebook group. It's not mine, it belongs to a woman by the name of Ajaya Summers, who I've found to be very delightful to talk to, and who's put this whole thing together. So I'll put the Facebook group link, and all you have to do is join that, and you can watch the recording. If I can figure it out, I will also put it on my website and my Substack and YouTube. I just don't know yet how to manage that technology.
Great.
And Emily, just to remind people too, you have the lunar circle. which I think I don't have the right name for, but you still are doing recorded
Yeah, I
trans
do recorded transmissions for every new and full moon, and usually some days before each new and full moon, and talk about the astrology that's currently at play and how you can work with it for growth and healing and success, very much about co-creating with the planetary forces. So yeah, that's available on my Substack.
Yeah, and people can sign up to, well, they can find it on your website and then go to sign up on Substack, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. All right. I think we covered it all. Any other last thoughts before we finish?
No, I'm excited. It's there are new frequencies coming in that we have not experienced in our lifetimes and new configurations, new planetary configurations. And I think it's going to be a very exciting year and very unexpected and very mind expansive, mind blowing.
Yeah, I think about Caroline Casey's quote, right? Believe nothing, entertain possibilities. And I would say, yeah, see how broadly you can expand your sense of what's possible
Mm-hmm.
and what you want, right? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Emily. I really appreciate you. And I love our conversations, and I'm sure we'll do this again sometime in the next few months. And have to all of you listening, have a wonderful beginning of the year. And thank you all for listening. And those of you that joined live, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Emily and Christine. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy